Louis van Gaal won 2 league titles and a Copa del Rey in his time at Barça, so why do so many remember him in a negative light? Today I'll be looking back at the Van Gaal years with a special focus on his relationship with the press, which played a big part in his downfall. When he arrived at Camp Nou in 1997, Barça had been 3 seasons without winning La Liga. The previous season, with Bobby Robson in charge, the team had won the European Cup Winners' Cup, the Copa del Rey and the Spanish Supercopa. But the public was not satisfied with the style of play or with Robson's 4-2-3-1 formation. President Núñez moved for Van Gaal, hoping he would not only bring success but also the type of attacking football that the fans had enjoyed when Johan Cruyff had been in charge. Van Gaal was another man from the Ajax school of football, and his recent success in winning the Champions League with the Dutch side, followed by another appearance in the final a year later, made many believe Van Gaal could repeat Cruyff's success at Barça. Van Gaal's Ajax team included some fantastic youngsters, such as Patrick Kluivert, Clarence Seedorf, the De Boer brothers, Frank and Ronald, Mark Overmars, Edgar Davids, goalkeeper Edwin van der Sar, Jari Litmanen, Michael Reiziger and Winston Bogarde, as well as the experienced Frank Rijkaard playing in defence alongside Danny Blind. Van Gaal immediately brought Reiziger with him to Barça, along with goalkeeper Ruud Hesp. The other signings that summer were Dragan Siric, Christophe Dugarry, Sonny Anderson and Rivaldo, though Barça would miss Ronaldo, who was sold on to Inter Milan that summer after just 1 season at the club. Van Gaal's problems with the press began from day one, when he decided to limit the number of players who could give interviews on any given day. The situation at the club was already divided into 2 factions, those loyal to Núñez and those loyal to Cruyff. The Cruyffistas wanted to get Núñez out in order to get Cruyff to come back as the first-team coach, and they would be hostile to Van Gaal from the beginning. In his press conferences, Van Gaal attempted to answer with his limited Spanish, but few praised him for making the effort. Instead, he was lampooned for his harsh accent and brusque manner. No doubt dealing with the press at a club like Barça is a much bigger task than at most other clubs. Van Gaal's mistake was to show his impatience and irritation at the type of question some journalists would throw at him, which sometimes made him come across as arrogant. Van Gaal introduced a goalkeeping coach for the first time at Barça. He insisted on stricter diets, and he also put in place the 4-3-3 formation, which would become the template for Barça ever since. And despite losing the Supercopa to Real Madrid in the first official games of the season, in the league the team began well, with 6 straight wins. Van Gaal's first team selection in the league demonstrates his ideas, and in the early days he experimented with Pep Guardiola and Albert Celades as central defenders. The team that day, which beat Real Sociedad 3-0, with Ruud Hesp in goal, a back 4 of Reiziger, Celades, Nadal and Sergi, a midfield 3 of De La Peña, Luis Enrique and Giovanni, and up front Figo, Sonny Anderson and Rivaldo. Although the team began strongly in the Spanish League, the defensive weaknesses were exposed in the Champions League, first by Tino Asprilla, who scored a hat-trick for Newcastle in the first group stage match. Then, after a 2-2 home draw with PSV Eindhoven and a defeat at Dynamo Kiev, Barça faced a return game at Camp Nou, needing a win to stay in the competition. 4 days before Kiev's visit to Camp Nou, Barça had beaten Real Madrid 3-2 at the Bernabeu in Van Gaal's first league Clásico to go 6 points clear at the top of the table. However, with Hesp suspended, Victor Bayer returned to the team against Dynamo, and he had a nightmare, twice being beaten to crosses by the excellent Andrei Shevchenko as Barça went down to a humiliating 4-0 defeat. Parts of the press showed little mercy with Van Gaal despite the decent start in the league. Johan Cruyff wrote a weekly column for the newspaper La Vanguardia, and it seemed obvious he was still bitter for the way he was sacked by Núñez, as he didn't hold back with his criticism. The club was divided, and after the Champions League elimination, form in the league dropped. There were 3 defeats in November and then 3 more in January, including a painful home defeat to Valencia, when Barça led 3-0, only to concede 4 goals in the last 25 minutes, with 2 goals from Claudio Lopez, who would prove to be a thorn in Barça's side in Van Gaal's time at Camp Nou. By the end of January, Barça's lead at the top of the table had been reduced to 1 point. Winston Bogarde had joined the club, but the defence had only got worse, with 13 goals conceded in the 4 league games in January. However, the defence improved, and at the start of March the team began to click, with a thrilling 4-2 win at Racing Santander, followed by a 3-0 victory over Real Madrid at Camp Nou, with Rivaldo, Figo and Luis Enrique in fantastic form. A run of 9 wins in 10 games was enough to clinch the title in mid-April, with 4 games remaining. Then at the end of April, Ruud Hesp was the hero as Barça beat Mallorca on penalties to win the Copa del Rey, making it Barça's first domestic double since 1959. A tremendous achievement for a coach in his first season. But just as in 1959, Barça's double was overshadowed by Real Madrid winning the Champions League in the same season, so Van Gaal's double did not earn him much credit, and many question marks remained. If the first season was a mixed bag, Van Gaal's second season in charge was even more complicated. It was Barca's centenary year, and the Champions League final that season would be played at Camp Nou. Expectations were high, but in the summer, De La Peña, Amor, Ferrer and Pizzi all left the club, while three more Dutchmen, Patrick Kluivert, Philip Cocu and Bolo Zenden, all signed. Many fans were unhappy at the trend. Barca began Van Gaal's second season irregularly, with just 2 wins in the first 6 games. In the Champions League, Barca were drawn in that season's group of death, along with Bayern Munich and Manchester United, the 2 teams that would eventually reach the final that season. Both games with United ended in thrilling 3-3 draws, but back-to-back defeats to Bayern Munich meant Barca once again failed to make it past the group stage. And once again in La Liga, a bad run of form arrived in late autumn, with the team taking just 3 points from 6 games, including a 1-0 defeat at home to Atletico de Madrid on the day that Barca celebrated the centenary. Call for Van Gaal's head grew. Van Gaal was now being openly mocked. Canal Plus's spoof news programme, Los Guignoles, a show similar to the UK Spitting Image, depicted him as a suit with a block of bricks for a head under a mop of blonde hair. And for some strange reason he was ridiculed for using a notebook. The famous Libreta de Van Gaal. Barca slipped down to 10th place in La Liga, and Van Gaal looked a sure bet for the sack when Barca visited Valladolid just before Christmas. He was saved by a goal from the 18-year-old Xavi Hernandez, and Barca continued the winning streak after Christmas to go top of the league at the end of January. The twins Frank and Ronald de Boer joined the team in the winter to increase the Dutch contingent of players to 8, and it looked for a while as if the team was finally finding its shape. The 11 chosen for Real Madrid's visit to Camp Nou in February show the typical team for that time, with Hesp in goal, a back four of Ronald de Boer, Abelardo, Frank de Boer and Sergi, a midfield three of Pep Guardiola, Luis Enrique and Cocu, and a front three of Figo, Kluivert and Rivaldo. The 3-0 win that day put Barca 5 points clear at the top of the table. Barca marched on to a second consecutive league title, winning by a clear 11 points. But praise for Van Gaal was still very limited. There was still a bad atmosphere around the team. During the second season, Van Gaal had a training ground spat with Roger and Oscar Garcia, which was shown on the sports section of the news. Nadal had been more or less frozen out, and Rivaldo was reported to be unhappy with Van Gaal's insistence that he had to play on the left. There were also reports of divides. The Dutch players sat together, the Spanish sat together, there was a Brazilian group. All in all, the atmosphere was still not good. In the summer of 1999, Celades, Roger, Oscar, Nadal, Pellegrini, Sonny Anderson and Giovanni all left the club. The new signings that summer, Litmanen, Simão, Danny Garcia and Frederic Deu, did little to improve things. The third season began. Once again, there were some positive signs, this time in the Champions League, where Barca stormed through the first group stage, including an impressive 4-2 win over Arsenal at Wembley. The team also began well in La Liga and were top of the table by week 9. Then late autumn arrived. Perhaps Halloween had an adverse effect on Van Gaal's teams, but things always seemed to go badly in November. This season was no different, with 4 straight defeats to Deportivo, Malaga, Valencia and Mallorca. There was also the bizarre story of when Rivaldo won the Ballon d'Or, which would lead to Van Gaal's most famous press conference. According to Van Gaal, Rivaldo came to him after winning the Ballon d'Or and told him he wanted to speak to the team. Van Gaal thought this was a good idea. He thought Rivaldo wanted to thank his teammates for their part in him winning the Ballon d'Or, but to Van Gaal's surprise, when Rivaldo got to speak to his teammates, he announced that from now on he was not going to play on the left. Van Gaal was obviously very surprised by this, and he left Rivaldo out of the team for the next 2 games. But Barca would fail to win either of those games, and according to Van Gaal, the team came to him and asked for Rivaldo to be restored to the team. Then in a bizarre press conference, Van Gaal was asked if he'd broken the dressing room pact. Van Gaal was obviously very irritated by this question. "Dressing room pact," he replied. "You are very bad, you are very bad." And then his famous phrase, "Siempre negativo, nunca positivo." You're always negative, you're never positive. The phrase was taken up and used against Van Gaal whenever Barca lost. Siempre negativo, siempre negativo. It really was all quite bizarre. The poor mood continued at the club, with Núñez and Van Gaal under continued pressure. But with the team finally performing well in the Champions League, there was always hope that Van Gaal could repeat his success with Ajax. As the season neared its end, the Champions League looked like the best chance of a trophy. After an epic comeback to beat Chelsea in the quarter-finals, Barca had to face Valencia in the semi-finals. The first leg in Valencia was a nightmare, with Barca going down 4-1, and the mood at Camp Nou for the second leg was not good. Few expected Barca to make the comeback. So when Mendieta scored for Valencia with 20 minutes to go, the reaction from the crowd was extremely hostile. Barça scored 2 late goals, but it was too little too late, and it would mean the end for both Núñez and Van Gaal. News that Núñez had decided to resign after 22 years in charge of the club was leaked to the press, and the official announcement came on May the 16th. Van Gaal remained in charge for the final league game of the season, a 2-2 draw at home to Celta on May the 19th, and then the following morning he called a press conference which began with the immortal phrase, "Gentlemen of the press, congratulations, I'm leaving." Van Gaal's decision was honourable. In leaving, he renounced 2 years of his contract, and therefore 2 years of pay he could have taken if he had hung around waiting to be sacked. All in all, I feel Van Gaal was very badly treated. Yes, he had his faults, his impatience, his poor communication skills, and his man management could all have been better for sure. But arriving at a divided club, combined with the media campaigns against him, made things very difficult. And of course there was a part 2 to the story. 2 years after leaving, Van Gaal was back at the club with Joan Gaspart as president. Part 2 is nearly always a disaster waiting to happen, and this was the case here. The club was in an even worse state than in Van Gaal's first period at the club. The team was in disarray, and by January the story was over as Van Gaal was sacked. It was a great shame. Van Gaal was a coach with great ideas. He showed energy and intensity in his work, and he put in place a 4-3-3 formation we've seen so often since. He also gave opportunities to youngsters such as Xavi, Pujol, Iniesta and Victor Valdés. But unfortunately some people remember him with these ridiculous ideas about his libreta and his poor use of the Spanish language. In many ways it was a shameful period in our history. People showed how easily they can be manipulated by a media campaign, and Van Gaal suffered and Barça suffered the consequences of this. It seems strange that Van Gaal still divides opinion 20 years later. Looking back at this time in our history, we should note that between 1994 and 2004, Barça only won 2 leagues, and they were both under Van Gaal. I, for one, will always remember him fondly. His honesty and sincerity were not always his best friend, and perhaps they played a part in his downfall. But the overall conclusion of the Van Gaal story is that of the press, who demonstrated once again that rather than supporting Barça, they're there to sell their papers. And if the consequences are negative for Barça, well, so be it. So there's the story of Van Gaal's time at Barça. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, send us a comment down in the comment section, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'll be back on Wednesday with another video. Until then, Visca el Barça, bye for now.